start the webinar. Good luck. Welcome everyone to our webinar. We are truly excited to have you all here today to talk about creating an enabling environment for nature-based enterprises. As we embark on this journey of learning and discussion, we want to acknowledge the diverse perspectives and backgrounds that enrich our conversation. We recognize the importance of representation and inclusivity in all forms of discourse, and we are committed to ensuring that these values are reflected in our sessions. We deeply value and respect the expertise of our speakers here today, whose insights and experiences are the foundation of this webinar. We have selected them for their profound knowledge and contributions to the field, and we believe that their perspectives will greatly enhance our understanding. As we proceed, let's engage with an open mind, respect for each other's views, and a shared commitment to learning and growth. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation. My name is Daniela Rizzi, and I'm a senior expert on nature-based solutions and biodiversity at the ICLEI European Secretariat. I'm going to be your moderator this morning, and we are joined by experts and city practitioners. So you see here 4 ladies, Siobhan McQuaid. We have also Jess Gildener. We have Liezl de Villers and Rosaleen Nogle. In today's webinar, we will focus on 2 overarching themes. We will first look at what local governments can do to foster entrepreneurship in support of urban nature with contributions from Siobhan and Jess. And we will then navigate to the various tools and levers that local governments have at their disposal to create market opportunities for nature-based solutions with concrete examples from Liezl and Rosaleen. Each of these segments will be followed by a Q&A. For this, we would like to invite you to pose your questions in a dedicated Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. So, how can local governments actually create an enabling environment for nature-based entrepreneurship? So, one of the points I want to start mentioning is market access and networking. So, we think that platforms for connecting with peers, fostering collaboration and shared learning are very important. These platforms can also share market trends and best practices, and they can raise the visibility of enterprises for potential buyers. Also, education and capacity building are key because enterprises are really happy to get training programs, and that we can have skill building webinars offered and workshops for entrepreneurs. Accelerator programs are also key as they spread knowledge and insights on emerging technologies for nature-based solutions. They can help incubate innovative enterprise ideas, and they support business development, market and financing opportunities, and also investment opportunities. So with this, I would like to start introducing you to Siobhan McQuaid. She is the Associate Director of the Innovation at the Centre for Social Innovation in Trinity College, Dublin, where she leads up research and innovation activities under the themes of sustainability and resilience. She's also the co-founder and director of Horizon Nogle, a social enterprise which is specialized in translating social innovation research into practice and growing ideas into viable, valued social enterprises. And in her spare time, Siobhan is finishing off a PhD on the governance of nature-based solutions. Welcome, Siobhan.
Thank you very much, Daniela. I'm really delighted to be here. If we could move to the next slide, please. My presentation this morning is in the topic of nature-based entrepreneurship, which is very much a passion of mine. And it's very much a new topic, though. The concept of nature-based entrepreneurship really only emerged a couple of years ago. And indeed, in Trinity College Dublin, we were involved in research defining what it is, what it means, and we continue to research what those opportunities are. And I'd like to focus today, though, on the role of cities, because they have a very important role in understanding and boosting nature-based entrepreneurship, and indeed creating this, ensuring that they have a part in this developing market for nature-based solutions. But if we move to the next slide, I'll start with an overview, I suppose, of when we talk about the market for nature-based solutions, what do we mean? And on the left here, you'll see in the small kind of pie chart, it's an extract from the UNEP State of Finance report for 2021, where they kind of saw that really it's the public sector at the moment that is very much dominating the market in terms of demand for nature-based solutions. Now, in the 2023 report, which was published recently, we're delighted to see that an increase in private sector involvement. Not much, it's gone from 14% to 18% in 2 years. But if that continues along that trajectory, by 2030, it should be a third of the market. And that's verging on what we have set targets for in an EC expert publication, where we call by 2030 for an increase in both public and private sector demand and investment in nature-based solutions. And we think a lot of that demand will come from the public sector, but also from the private sector and the third sector, and from blended projects across those three areas. So that's demand. But what about supply? I mean, if you look at that massive kind of exponential growth that is expected, who is going to supply it? At the moment, much of the nature-based solutions are delivered, planned and delivered within the public sector as well. So it's really important that within the public sector, as Daniela said in the introduction, everyone is trained up and understanding, you know, the various dimensions of nature-based solutions. But the public sector are unlikely to be delivering nature-based solutions for the private sector. So this is where we see an increased role and an opportunity for the private sector to get involved in meeting this increased demand for nature-based solutions. And what do we mean by the private sector? Well, there's already a number of large kind of multi-sector corporates like Arup, for example, who are delivering nature-based solutions and helping cities and large corporates to develop them. But what we're particularly interested in is nature-based enterprises. And nature-based enterprises are very often small, locally based enterprises embedded in the local community and with a deep level of knowledge of local practice. And the local context. So if we move on to the next slide, just a brief overview of some of the kind of opportunities. We often hear this expression of a just transition. So moving from kind of fossil fuel intensive industries and industries that are have a net negative effect on biodiversity to nature positive industries. And you can see from this report that came out last year, again from UNEP, IUCN and the ILO, that there are massive opportunities here for job creation in areas like reforestation, peatland restoration, and so on. In fact, this report estimates approximately 20 million jobs could be created by 2030. So if we move to the next slide, please. What do we mean when we talk about a nature-based enterprise? And these are very often the kind of companies and enterprises, and sometimes they're in the majority of cases we found they're private for-profit companies, but they very often have a hybrid objective, and there's some that are in the non-profit sector. So what we have is a nature-based enterprise in terms of a definition. It's an umbrella term, and it's used to describe businesses or organizations from multiple different economic sectors that are driven by a common mission to work with and for nature to address climate change and biodiversity challenges. So NBEs deliver nature-based solutions, which by definition contribute to nature protection, conservation and restoration, while simultaneously benefiting people and society. So while the term might be new, I think you might already be familiar with many of the types of companies that are operating in this sector and who may not recognise themselves as a nature-based enterprise, as it's such a new term. So, for example, you have companies in water management delivering sustainable urban drainage systems. You can have companies planning and delivering and maintaining green buildings, companies and farmers in regenerative agriculture, regenerative forestry. And then there are new emerging sectors like enterprises in smart technologies using sensors, for example, to make sure that the investment in nature-based solution is sustained and is achieving its impact. So there are many other sectors. If we move to the next slide, please, and if you just keep clicking through there until we see the three different types. So we often see in nature-based solutions that there's a long kind of investment in planning, and then there's an intensive investment in capital investment when they're being delivered on the ground. And then there's, a long tail of, when they're involved in the operational, or we call it the stewardship and maintenance phase. And we can see different types of companies and enterprises involved at different stages. So, for example, in the planning sector, what we have often seen cities reach out to maybe professional landscape architects and biodiversity experts and consult with them on their plans for nature-based solutions. In the delivery phase, we can see specialised horticulture contractors. And this is, and I'm going to come back to this, this is an area where we feel that there's a very important role for cities in training up contractors on what are nature-based solutions and how can they deliver and maintain them more effectively. And then really this last area of stewardship is where we think there's a tremendous opportunity for community-based enterprises and social enterprises to enter into co-governance arrangements with city councils. And we've seen some really interesting examples of that, which I'll present in a moment. So if we move to the next slide, one of the things that we did is we work with 10 cities, primarily in Europe, but we also had hubs in this project called Connecting Nature in South America, in Brazil, in South Korea, and also in China. And we developed this guidebook based on city experience on how a city can support nature-based innovation and entrepreneurship. And this is going to be updated very soon. But what we found was, before you even get into developing a plan for support, it's very important to raise awareness of what the concept is and what the value that these such enterprises could create. And then very often nature-based solutions are managed by an environment department or, land use or planning, but it's important to build alliances with the organizations and the players who are developing economic strategies and supporting small businesses. And then the last stage is the planning, implementation and monitoring. So I've put in a link there, and maybe Danny or Olga can add it to the chat, a link to this guidebook. And there's a series of guidebooks, not just on nature-based entrepreneurship, but on every aspect of nature-based solutions on this website. So if we move to the last slide, I'm just going to finish with a couple of examples. So this is the city, this example comes from Agnieszka Oszypiuk in the city of Poznan in Poland. And I don't know if you've ever been to Poznan, but it's one of the larger cities in Poland, but it's got a very dense historic city centre, narrow streets and very little space for nature-based solutions, which means in the summer that they suffer from a lot of the heat island effect, lots of heat. So they didn't have space to build new nature-based solutions. So what they did is they cooperated with schools and institutions to dig up and de-seal their concrete surfaces and put in nature-oriented playgrounds. And they wanted to do these throughout the city, but they had a major challenge because they didn't have anyone who could design and co-create these with schools. And they had to go to another city to find a designer. So what they did is they launched a training program aimed at upskilling their own local businesses. And today they have a network of such designers and contractors who are delivering services not just in Poznan, but to other cities which are increasingly implementing nature-based solutions. So that's a very practical example of what a city can do. And then the last example that I'm going to present in the next slide thank you, is from Genk. So Genk had a different type of nature-based solution. They had this polluted 8-kilometre stream which was flooding and not very nice, and they wanted to transform it into a multifunctional linear park, the Steamer Valley. But they also wanted to engage local citizens and businesses. And they piloted this idea called the Steamer Deals, where they essentially opened it up to citizens and business. And they said, anybody who's got an idea of how we can use nature, you know, to support local businesses or local enterprises or local charities, come and talk to us. And they entered a deal with them to support them in whatever way they could. And they were really surprised with the huge response. They had, you know, ideas coming forward for steamer. You can see here honey, but there was also beer, there was ice cream. And then there was a lot of not-for-profit use of kind of social and community gardens and foraging activities. So it was a wonderful example of, you know, how a city can develop these new forms of social innovation. So I'm going to leave you at this point because I think I might have even gone over my time. But if we move on to the next slide, I'll just finish by inviting you to join us on this Connecting Nature Enterprise platform, where it's a global community of anybody, and it's open not just to nature-based enterprises, but to cities, anybody who's interested in this concept of what is a nature-based enterprise and how we can support it. So we invite you to join us there, and we look forward to hopefully hearing about your journey on this road. Thank you very much, and I'll hand you back now to Daniela.
Thank you so much, Siobhan, for this presentation and for letting us learn more about nature-based enterprises and how they're locally geared, and also to illustrate what municipalities can do to foster them. So with this, I would like to pass the mic to Jess Gildener. So we're going to now hear from someone who has been working a lot with nature-based entrepreneurs. Jess Gildener, she's a facilitator, and she's part of the Good Ideas program of the Melting Pot. And she supports charities, social enterprises, and entrepreneurs to figure things out and accelerate their ambitions. She has worked in social and environmental impact for over 20 years. Her work has spanned community and partnership development, program management, and strategy, as well as she has been helping to design and deliver services to support business growth. As a freelancer, facilitator, and service designer, she now helps anyone who wants to make a difference to put their ideas into action and to get the confidence to do it. So welcome, Jess.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Right, okay, I'm just going to share my screen and make sure you can see that. Okay, that working? Great. Okay. So yeah, I am sitting here in Leith in Edinburgh in Scotland. And last year I was involved in facilitating and supporting an accelerator for nature-based enterprises in Glasgow, just over the other side of Scotland. So I'm going to whittle through quite a few slides just so that you can kind of get a flavour of it, and just get a sense of what we did, who they were, what was involved in it. Okay, so first of all, I should say we had, as with all of these things, there are a lot of partners involved, including Connecting Nature, which is just what Siobhan was talking about. So Siobhan was really instrumental in helping us kind of understand what this could be and set this up. The Melting Pot is a co-working space with very much with social values and environmental values at the heart of it. And so we support a lot of social entrepreneurs and environmental entrepreneurs. We also had academia involved, so we were closely partnered with the University, Glasgow Caledonian University, Glasgow City Council, of course, and also a funder, Social Innovation Connect. So it was a real partnership effort. So for this accelerator, what were we looking for? We were looking for ideas that could result in positive social and environmental outcomes, of course, and incorporating the use of nature, and that could be directly or indirectly. We were really looking for people who had started to explore their potential customers and who their beneficiaries might be. So this was really, really key. We kind of wanted to find that sweet spot of who was kind of ready to do this and not just having an inkling of an idea. They kind of needed to have thought about it a bit. And also how their idea could become financially sustainable. So with that in mind, we opened it out to applications. We got over 40. In the end, we've got this lovely bunch of people who were our cohort last year. So you can see them here. They came together really frequently over a 5-month period. So who we had ideas around nature-based mental health services, around electric car tourism, ecological gardening, rain capture, public seating. We have a big issue with rain overflow in Glasgow. Eco creativity kits, eco period products, and interactive street pollution monitors, which were kind of nature-based interactive street pollution monitors. So it was really, really diverse. We kind of went from like really quite technical to really, really creative and kind of everything in between. So what it actually is, what the actual accelerator is, it's an incubation, and we try and take a really holistic whole approach to the person as well as the idea. So we want to develop the individual as well as the idea. We know that ideas don't always pan out, but if you've invested in the person, then if they have ideas in the future, if they're able to take forward future enterprises, they've still got those skills and they've still had that capacity built within them. So we look at well-being, we look at the potential of the person and the idea, we help them build networks. This is absolutely fundamental. We help them use tools, give them new tools. So it's very much based in design thinking. We give them some structure as well to actually do this work. So something is the time and the space. They are busy people. They're people who tend not to give themselves permission to stop working and to work on their idea. So this gives them the structure to actually do that. And then space together. So actually building community. And you'll see that this is fundamental, like having the community. So we had 19 workshops. Some of them were in person, some were online. This was over 5 months. We also had one-to-one coaching and group coaching. There's a final showcase event, and also we were really helping people to learn through a design thinking methodology. So, what it briefly looked like, from week 1, we were really trying to help them understand what their why was and what the problem they were trying to solve was. This is really key, that people actually understand and are able to articulate the problem in the first place, which may sound really obvious, but actually it isn't. Lots of tools like value proposition canvas, business model canvas, prototyping, etc., as well as site visits. Lots of site visits, lots of testing. So lots of trying to get people to go out and talk to people. Sorry, I know that I've got a little bit fuzzy there. But really key is that we actually get people talking and getting feedback. This is fundamental because people hold their idea very closely, very preciously, and you can really understand that. We need to help them break it a bit and actually help them understand that feedback is healthy, it's really good, it's going to make their product or their service better. And any entrepreneurs out there, I'm sure you can appreciate, we know how hard it is to do that. So how it actually works. So you've seen the program, but actually this mindset thing is absolutely fundamental. So this idea that if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So this is a quote by Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, and it's basically the kind of mindset underpinning the whole program. That we're really like, okay, just try something, prototype it, fail, learn, and then go around again. So this is where the design thinking approach comes in. Perfection is out the window. You can imagine that like we've got a lot of high achievers there. Perfection is like something that actually they really are striving for. So to actually help them understand, you're not aiming for perfection right now, you're aiming for your best first rubbish draft, and that's quite challenging for folk. The really, really big thing though was building community. It was absolutely fundamental. It's without question the thing that people valued most, that peer support. So actually being able to build trusting relationships with other entrepreneurs was absolutely essential. I was literally just on the WhatsApp group of that cohort. It's been well over a year. They're still all in touch with each other. I'm in touch with them. It's really supportive. It's a really, really lovely community. It's really key. So some of the tools and activities we use, lots of group contracting, defining the problem, empathy mapping, storytelling, lots and lots of tools that they can go away, and use either in their current idea or anything that they would do in the future. So all of these things were really, really about capacity building. The launch, so we were building towards a launch, but obviously this is kind of one part. The real thing was really about the connection and the peer support, but also we wanted to give them something to aim towards. So we had a launch. We invited in lots of interesting folk, influential folk, so that they could showcase what they've been doing and do a soft launch of prototypes or minimum viable products. So we wanted to bring in stakeholders, other alumni from previous years, funders, supporters, anyone that could open doors for them and have an interesting conversation with them. Impact. So I'm just going to run through a few quotes here. Entrepreneurship can be really, really lonely. So having those other people to talk to, get advice from, that really understand it, that was really of value for a lot of folk. Really helps to solidify the idea, look at the audience and do some initial tests. So, and from that, this person was convinced that there was potential. And I love this one. I realized I could learn something from every single person there. I really love this one because this really just symbolizes that whole idea of, okay, you may be creating something that's a business. We're all kind of brought up to think that this means we have to be in competition, that we have to kind of keep separate from each other. And actually, what's wonderful about this approach, about being nature-based approach, is that we are part of an ecosystem, we are part of a community, and that actually when we learn from each other, we are absolutely stronger, which sounds a bit cheesy, but it's very, very true. And then also there just been thousands of valuable moments. Like no one could really say it was that thing or it was that thing. It was the whole thing together. And it really, really was based in a person's fundamental values and what drives them as an entrepreneur and a person. Bravery to go out and experiment. I love this. This is really, really fundamental for folk. Like I was saying, just being able to get out there and ask questions, learn. So I realise I'm probably well over now, but just to let you know, the impact is really ongoing. And like I said, the connection is still happening. Many of the ventures are still operating, and certainly those that aren't are going on to other things. Let's see, the role of the city. So this is really fundamental. I've got my last two slides here. I want to introduce you to Gillian Dick. So she's the manager of spatial planning at Glasgow City Council. Doesn't seem like an obvious link, but she was so key. She was an absolute fountain of information, connections, funding. She opened doors. She provided that meaningful networking. So this is really so fundamental, the role of the city, providing that really meaningful networking, opening the doors, making introductions to useful people, even if you're not sure if it's going to go anywhere. It's so key because these things then have a knock-on impact. Gathering and sharing the funding and policy information. What we were finding is that people were going and finding it themselves and having real gaps in their knowledge. And so even if you just gather it and share it, joining the dots across sectors and departments, it is confusing out there for people. It takes them a lot of time to try and figure it out. If you can help them do that, that would be incredible. Be part of that community as well. Don't see yourself as separate, see yourself as part of that community. And allowing that space to test, to fail, and to learn, and to try it again. That's really key. You're not going to get success 100% of the time straight away. It's just really, really kind of acknowledging that testing, failing, and learning quickly is the really kind of is going to make it the most effective approach. Okay, so that's me. I apologize if I've gone over. So anyway, here's a link.
Thanks so much, Jess, for this very, very enthusiastic presentation and about the work that the Melting Pot is doing to accelerate nature-based enterprises. I would like now to pass the mic to Olga, my colleague here, as we have some questions for our speakers.
Great. So, and again, if there are any questions also during the presentations, please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom panel. But yeah, maybe Siobhan, could you tell us a bit more about like the one factor that you would find most important when setting up an NBE, and maybe also how what the role of the city can really be there? I mean, just obviously now also provided great examples of what Glasgow's role there was, but if you could maybe elaborate on that.
Well, I suppose there's two questions there. The first one is, what's the most important factor in being an MBE? I think the clear distinguishing factor, and you've seen it from Jess's presentation there, is a clear mission to support nature, and that's a key driver of the organisation. So it's really this passion for nature and biodiversity and contributing to its conservation, restoration, and so on. And what we found is that the more successful a company is, the more impact it can have on nature. So the two, you know, the two are very compatible. So that's the most important thing for a nature-based enterprise, is this passion for nature. It might seem obvious, but there you go. In terms of a city council, so you heard Jess talk about Gillian there. Our experience is that the most important thing for a city council is to be able to reach out and connect with the wider, we call it the innovation ecosystem. So that you might know, and this happened in Glasgow City Council, Gillian is a planner, you know, but she was open-minded, and she reached out to the economics department and to these different agencies, and already organizations like the Melting Pot, which were doing fantastic work helping to accelerate businesses in other fields. So not to be afraid to reach out and make those connections, because, you know, nature and biodiversity, you know, it's an area where there's an increasing amount of citizen awareness and interest, but there's also significant economic potential there. So these other agencies are really open to new ideas, as Jess has showed, are really instrumental in putting in place these support programs. So my advice would be, reach out and connect with these other economic actors and tell them about the potential.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then maybe, Jess, in terms of practicalities, like what can cities do beyond, well, obviously reaching out to other departments, providing the support? Obviously, well, usually you need a space for these type of things. Like what would be the, I guess, starting point then for a city?
I think it's about building partnerships, finding out what's out there already. I think, you know, like Siobhan was saying, there are people already doing things. I think like what the city can really do is open the doors and make the connections. So I can see that this, you know, and I'm not surprised there's questions about funding. You know, I didn't mention funding because that's the thing that, you know, would seem really, really obvious. But we know that that's really, really difficult. So maybe it is around helping people navigate it. I think that can be really tricky. The navigation around the multiple ecosystems, places of support, where the funding is, showing that there is support from the city, I think has so much power. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, like Siobhan was saying, were, you know, they're really quite small, they're quite kind of community-based a lot of the time. You know, some support from the city is incredibly meaningful for them, you know, when it comes to getting funding or getting through the door, getting a conversation with people. It's actually really, really helpful.
Great, thanks. And we also have one question from the Q&A chat. So did you actually manage for the companies to get funding, and were private investors involved, or was it all the city? So I guess, well, both of you, from your experiences.
I'll just jump in just because just around the program that we were doing. So we weren't giving people funding. What we were doing was doing capacity building so that they could essentially go out and pitch for funding. There are a lot of other programs out there, and there's specific funding streams that people can go to, but what they needed were the skills to be able to pitch. So that's what we were focused on.
I can comment on that as well. And I would say that, yes, we definitely have examples where impact investors are involved in the scaling up of these types of enterprises. But what I would also say is that it's not, the interests of investors aren't always aligned with the mission of the nature-based enterprises. So we're actually doing a piece of work ongoing at the moment. Be delighted if anybody would like to contribute to that, where we're interviewing nature-based enterprises from around the world on, well, what type of financing, what is your business model, how can you grow, how can you scale? But there is, what we are finding is that there is a kind of a concern among some nature-based enterprises that taking in private investment will mean a focus on short-term returns. Whereas what we're finding is it can be a really good partnership when you've the right investor, these patient impact investors involved in different kind of governance structures, that can work really well. So we're finding a mix of different type of investment. And what I would say is watch this space. We'll be publishing the results of this kind of survey and announcing them at an event called Nature Futures 24 on the 6th of March next year. You're all invited to come along, and we'll have a couple of people, and we're focusing on financing in one of the sessions. So yeah, come along and we'll give you a much better answer to that question then. You'll get all details on the nature-based enterprise platform if you're involved in that.
Perfect, great. Then thanks so much, Siobhan and Jess, and I'll pass it over to Daniela.
Thanks so much for these presentations. And now we're going to dive into, let's say, a very, very complementing topic, which is about fostering market opportunities for nature-based solutions. So we're going to talk about the demand side here. And I have a slide here just to make setting the scene for you. So of course, for these fostering marketing opportunities, policy and planning support are very important. So here are some examples: tax incentives, grants, subsidies for nature-focused businesses, but also considering the planning arena, construction codes that include nature-based solutions or ordinances or master plans. Also the regulatory framework, which we think is going to become more and more nature related. So here, these frameworks can help to build up clear and transparent conditions for nature-based solutions, so you have very clear regulations in favor of them. Also, nature-based procurement can help a lot, so that, for example, cities, they can have a much more nature-based way to run their procurement practices. This can be very, very fostering. So with this, I would like now to invite our next speaker. She's Liezl Villers, and she's a senior environmental manager and at Overstrand Municipality in South Africa. She has a degree in conservation from Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and she has previously worked for government organizations such as South African National Parks, Cape Nature, Provincial Government of Environmental Affairs, and for water affairs within the Working for Water program. Her career in the sphere of environmental management started in the coastal towns of the Overstrand Municipality in 2010, when she joined the environmental team as the head of the section and dealt mainly with biodiversity management and the impacts of municipal services on the environment. So very happy to have you here today, Liz, and the mic is with you.
Thank you, Daniela. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Make sure that everyone can see that.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Great. Right, so I will be focusing on the Unrus River Catchment to Coast project. And this is just to show the idea, the concept that we have to conserve the ecological and biodiversity function of an ecosystem from the top of the catchment down to the sea, to provide the natural and human environment of a healthy ecosystem. The most important objective of this concept within the human environment is that if we protect our green infrastructure, this will ensure, for example, our wetlands, it will ensure that we will also protect our grey infrastructure. So focus here is on this area, which is the Hemel called the Hemel Aarde Valley. Heaven and earth in English is what it means. It's a beautiful valley, very rich in agriculture, export wine, fruit, beautiful setting. And that is the Unrus River, very small, only 17 kilometers from the top down to the catchment, from the catchment down to the sea. And it has a beautiful peat wetland system in it, and also an estuary that I will show to you just a little bit later. So this is the Unrus Palmiet peat wetland drone footage, and you will see some burn scarring. The black is some burn scarring that we've had in 2019, January 2019 fire. Just want to go back to this slide. This Unrus Palmiet wetland, due to natural and anthropogenic factors over thousands of years, this wetland has been drying out. But lately, the impacts of climate change with increased temperatures, droughts, and fires, this wetland has been impacted much more. This wetland is a valley bottom wetland with peat layers up to 7 meters down to the basin. It was formed about 18,000 years ago during the glacial maximum period, and it's been dated to be about 10,000 years old. It is currently known to be one of the oldest valley bottom wetlands in the Western Cape, if not in South Africa. It's about 33 hectares in size. But in 2019, a fire raged through the Overstrand. We had 3 fires on that day. And this fire also impacted on this peat wetland, because this peat wetland is unstable due to the drying out of the wetland. And we had a subsurface fire in this wetland, underground, in other words, that lasted for 4 months until we eventually, with special techniques, we could get this fire under control. Now, peat soils, when they dry out, they become hydrophobic, which means that they cannot retain moisture or water anymore. And this is one of the most important functions of a wetland system. Now, this peat wetland, in other words, large sections of it lost its ability to retain water, and it dried out. And it was subdued to severe fires over years, and the soil was lost to ashes. So just to show some of these photographs, you'll see on the right-hand corner, that is what peat soil is supposed to look like. Wet, almost clayey structure. And the left-hand corner, you'll see that looks very dry. It's hard, it's completely dried out. And the left bottom corner is a soil sample that we took, and you will see very dark color and you'll see light colors. And that actually is the different layers that showed over time the fires that this wetland has actually dealt with. Now, the next slide is a quite recent event, flooding event, that completely destabilized this wetland. In September 2023, a 1 in 200 year flood caused this huge destruction in this wetland when 144 millimeters of rain fell within 24 hours in this small catchment. The wetland changed dramatically, and it's pretty much out of equilibrium. It is unlikely that we will be able to restore this wetland to what it used to be and to its full depth again. But it's not all lost. And with effort from our involved stakeholders, we should be able to restore some of this wetland function again. This is just an aerial view. Don't know if you can recall the previous slides that I showed where we still had the intact wetland with the burnt scars. Well, this is what's left, and that's basically just sand and small pockets of peat that is still surviving there. That is just to show from far, that is pretty much the impact of that flood. And just to come down to a slide, just to show this is at the sea. And basically, the entire wetland system is lying on the beach. And the black water that you see there is the fine, fine sediment of 10,000-year-old peat washing ashore in the waves. So this was quite heart-wrenching to watch. And this was further peat blocks there in the right-hand top corner, blocks of peat that washed out on the shoreline. And the beach was just reeds and peat and palmite, which is the plant that is very significant in this specific peat wetland. And then at the bottom is just photographs of and it was about 2 meters. You can see the lady standing on one of those layers of the massive material and debris of logs and trees that actually washed up. During this storm or this flood, the fact that this wetland was not intact and it could not do its job of retaining that flood, we lost the potable water system to Hermanus, the town of Hermanus. We didn't have water for 5 days. And this cost millions of rands to restore. We lost access road from Hermanus to Caledon, and that cost 80 million rand to restore. We lost a bridge called Campiel Bridge, which is a low water bridge, was built in the 1960s. And on the other side of that bridge, we had a community of mentally and physically disabled young people, a community of 90 people that was cut off for 3 days. And we had to ensure that they had water, electricity, and food and medical supplies. And that cost us another couple of million. So if we do not look after our green infrastructure, if we don't secure that, the impact and cost that we as government organizations have to give out or have to later pay is much greater than just ensuring that we look after our green infrastructure. So what we decided to do is that we need to get a group together to restore the system because climate change is not going away and floods will continue. And now that this system is already disturbed in this way, the next floods that will come, even if it's a 1 in 20 or a 1 in 50 year flood, will have a much greater impact on our communities and our infrastructure going forward. So we set up what we call the Onrus River Catchment to Coast Steering Committee. And we brought in a lot of people. At the moment, there's about 40 people on the steering committee of various expertise, but it includes members of the community, landowners, funding partners, corporate sector, NGOs, people, district, local government, water users associations. And if we need more expertise, we'll bring in more. But these groups sit together and we devise ideas of what must we do to secure the system going forward. One of the ideas that we have is a water fund. It's not the only idea, but I just want to put this one, to talk about this one now. And the Water Fund is an organization that basically creates and enhances financial governance mechanisms, which unites stakeholders, public and private organizations or communities around a common goal to contribute to water security in a system. And this is done through nature-based solutions and sustainable, at the end of the day, sustainable catchment management. So what is the life cycle of a water fund? So first of all, you look at the feasibility. You define what the problem is. What is your objective, basically? You attract the specific partners that will assist you in this process, and you identify a coordinator or project manager that can run the process. Then you look at the design. What is the strategic plan or your terms of reference, your objectives that you need to put in place for the restoration, or even establishing the different governance? Then creation, setting up the structure, which we've done, the steering committee, operation, the development and the implementation of whether it's a rehabilitation plan or various other operational plans that needs to be brought in to get to your objective. And then the maturity at the end of the day, which is securing a more long-term viability to create a larger impact on the catchment to coast system.
Liezl?
Yes.
Yeah, you're wrapping up, right? Thank you.
I'm wrapping up. This is my last slide.
Perfect.
So to ensure ecosystem integrity, these are for water security, these are the various objectives that we are looking at. And I'm just going to look at the highlights. So it will be for domestic water security, economic water security, urban water security, environmental security, and that would be to have the resilience to any related disasters for the future. And that's the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liezl, for this very, very interesting example that you brought with the water fund and also the whole scene setting of the local context there. It was very interesting to hear. I would like now to ask Rosaleen, and I'll present her. So Rosaleen Nogle has over 15 years of experience in the water sector as a municipal engineer. Mrs. Nogle is currently employed by the Buffalo Sewer Authority as the principal sanitary engineer, and she has been overseeing capital projects and regulatory compliance for the collection and drainage systems, including green infrastructure components. Previously, she has held various management, supervision, and engineering positions with Buffalo Sewer. Rosie also holds numerous green infrastructure, floodplain, and stormwater management certifications. So Rosaleen, I'm giving you the mic now. Welcome.
Can I also have the chance to share here? Here we go.
Yes.
There we go. So the land that I am speaking to you from today is on which the city of Buffalo is located, and from where I greet you this morning is the territory of the Seneca Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Six Nations Confederacy. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty of Peace and Friendship, a pledge to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. It is also covered by the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua between the United States government and the Six Nations Confederacy, which further affirmed Haudenosaunee land rights and sovereignty in the state of New York. Today, this region is still home to the Haudenosaunee people, including colleagues at the Buffalo Sewer Authority, residents of our city, and consultants at the University of Buffalo. don't know if I'm sharing everything here, but
Yes. No, you're just seeing your slides. It's perfect.
okay, perfect. So Buffalo, we are in the state of New York. We are not New York City, which is a common misperception even within the United States. And so I just did want to point out that we are a Great Lakes city. We are not the city of New York City. And in fact, our much closer neighbors are the city of Toronto, Canada, Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Each of those is within 3 hours drive. New York City is about 8 hours away. And whereas New York City is a very, very large metropolis, Buffalo is a densely urbanized area, surrounded by mostly suburban and agricultural areas. So we are urban, from which I speak, in the city of Buffalo, and densely urban within the city limits itself. But then we are surrounded by areas that are definitely not urbanized. And then heading up into Canada, you again have densely urbanized, surrounded by farmland. We were looking at nature-based solutions because our sewer system is a combined sewer system in which both sanitary sewage and stormwater flow together through the same pipes. It was constructed that way in the 19th century, before our treatment facility was constructed in 1935. And with the construction of our treatment facility in the 1930s, we put in a series of interceptor pipes to convey flows during dry weather to that treatment facility. But to this day, 35 times a year, our system overflows to the waterways. And as such, we are under United States orders, an administrative order from the US EPA and the Department of Justice to abate those combined sewer overflows and to eliminate our impact on the environment. We also looked at nature-based solutions in order to make sure that the neighborhoods within the city limits were actually being benefited and not just our neighbors downstream. And as this has developed, we've also started looking to this as a means of flood management. We, again, are located right along the Great Lakes, and in the area that we are located, we're not seeing drought. We're not seeing sea level rise in the traditional sense of sea level rise. We're an inland city, but we have this freshwater coast that is being impacted by wind under climate change. And so anything we can do to manage floods that are increasing is necessary at this time. We have started with new development regulations going back to 2014 for all new development of a 1/4 acre or more. And that work is being privately funded. Then we also have a $15 million environmental impact bond, which was issued in 2021, with all of that work to be completed by 2028, with which is a public loan of private monies, and it is restricted to specific areas within the city of Buffalo. And then we also have our private development grant, which is a $500,000 allocation from the publicly funded budget each year towards private development, but in voluntary circumstances, capturing a 1/2 acre or more of impervious surface. Again, the new development regulations are citywide. They include erosion and sediment controls for all new development. If the stormwater from the new development is discharging directly to the waterways, there's post-construction flows need to be maintained at the pre-development 1, 10, and 100-year storms. And then new water quality treatment has to be installed on that stormwater before it can be discharged to the waterways. But for the vast majority of the city of Buffalo, again, it is combined sewers. And so the stormwater is coming into the combined sewers, and it will result in the combined sewer overflows during storm events. And so in those cases, rather than worrying about water quality treatment, if it can be treated at the treatment facility, there's no reason to be doing really intensive water quality treatment at the site level. But the issue is getting that water to the treatment facility. And so the post-development 25-year storm flows are being attenuated back to the pre-development 2-year storm peak discharge. And as we have moved from 2014 to today, we have really prioritized nature-based solutions. As we first rolled this out, we allowed for more excuses from developers because there were not as many enterprises in Buffalo that could do this work. But as that private workforce and entrepreneurship has developed, those excuses have gone away, and now we do have developers understanding that they need to do this work. With our environmental impact bond, it is specific to these areas in gray and blue with CSO basin numbers labeled here, that this work has to be restricted to. These areas, I have 3 maps here. The one that is mostly blue is showing where we have low-income housing and low-income households today. The one in red, yellow, blue, and green is a map from the 1930s. It's referred to as a redlining map. This was an area that the U.S. government in the 1930s determined that no U.S. government dollars could be invested in those areas in yellow and red. Those areas in yellow and red tended to be predominantly non-white neighborhoods and low-income neighborhoods. And so not only did these areas not have investment to begin with, and we're already starting to suffer from urban decay, the U.S. government, by policy, chose not to invest in them and restricted dollars from being invested in them. And so as part of our commitment as Buffalo Sewer Authority, we are now very specifically investing in those areas that have been disinvested from. With this environmental impact bond, it is restricted to public sites only. And we have very strict requirements in that bond as to what our goals are as far as capturing stormwater and retaining and or detaining it on site. And in talking with the community, their main focus is on viaducts, where we have sunken parts of the city to allow roads to pass underneath rail bridges, and then in areas with public housing. So these are areas that have been traditionally, again, causes for public concern. And then the maintenance for this work will be done by our workforce development team. These are people that we have recruited from these priority neighborhoods who are looking for ways to achieve better employment and engage in entrepreneurship. And the workforce development program allows them to develop a trade, business development, and other skills. So at first they are being funded through Buffalo Sewer Authority, but eventually they do have the opportunity to begin their own businesses, working as contractors for us and for those private developers. And then finally, we have our private development grant that we have just begun to roll out. This is again targeted in these priority neighborhoods. $500,000 a year are being allocated. with a nonprofit preference within these neighborhoods for churches, community-based organizations, hospitals, social services agency. And part of the reason for this nonprofit preference is that most of the residential housing within these neighborhoods is owned by outside owners. People in the neighborhoods do not own their homes very frequently in these neighborhoods. Instead, it tends to be people that are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, owning the homes and not maintaining them. And so this, again, keeps the investment in our city. And that's me done.
Rosaleen, thanks so much for this very interesting example. I know that the US is actually very developed in terms of impact investment, and it's really incredible the work that you're doing. I'll pass the mic to Olga. Olga, are there any questions? Because we're already a little bit over time.
Yeah, we're a bit over time, so we're actually rather looking at maybe just a more general question. So Rosaleen, obviously in your case, you're using a lot of public finance to be able to create these market opportunities, and you're looking at workforce development. How have you, and I mean, you already alluded to it, no? Like back in the days, companies didn't actually know how to do nature-based solutions. Now they do. Like how has this journey been for you, and what was kind of maybe the reflection also from the private sector? Have you engaged with them on this?
What the biggest thing has been that their nature-based solutions aren't always as easily maintained as is intuitive. That they do, especially in a highly urbanized environment, they do require quite a bit of maintenance in order to remain betterments rather than detriments in the urban environment. That there's a lot of concerns about safety, and there's a lot of concerns that one person's wildflower is another person's weed. And so, and quite frankly, a lot of our residents cannot swim. And so any stormwater retention or detention ponds or anything where you have standing water is a very big concern of health and safety, that somebody might fall or a child might decide that they want to go swimming and they can't swim. So that there's those risks. And then again, there's also the risk of mosquitoes and disease. So there's a lot of good with nature-based solutions, but there's also a lot of concerns when putting it into an existing urban core.
Fair enough. I think, and especially then also the importance of education around nature-based solutions, and maybe, I guess, sensitizing towards them as viable solutions, for sure. Definitely. Great. Then maybe Liezl, on the water fund that you're looking at setting up now, could you maybe explain what the role of the corporate sector is, or the private sector? Will they then also have a role later on when it has been set up to maybe benefit from, well, I guess, maintaining then the catchment area?
Yes, Olga, the idea, this is still a concept, and I mean, the water fund in the city of Cape Town is working very well. It's already established there. So our plan would be that we will be looking at that as just one concept through continued support from landowners, because a lot of the catchment is in private hands. So the water fund would, through that process, support the private landowners to keep that part of the catchment clean. But then through that process, as a handover, when it becomes manageable to the landowners, then that becomes the landowner's responsibility, because policy in our country is very clear on biodiversity management that it is your responsibility. to keep your land clear of invasive alien plants, for example. So the water fund is something that needs to support the beginning, but then later it needs to be handed over to the landowner to take that further. But then that's just one section, as I stated. There needs to be national government, provincial government needs to come in with other funding support as well with regards to the wetlands management and taking that forward. And through that process to bring in skills development as well, that we can train and first of all educate, but also train people for job security on how do we take these skills in our areas that we can take it to especially in our area where agricultural areas, that we can take those skills and that there's greater job creation in our area. So it's, like I said, the water fund's just a small section, but the plan is to make it basically a big puzzle that will then be a pilot that we can use in other areas as well.
Liezl, maybe just making the leap back to the first presentation. I think this mends very well, because I'm remembering here from Siobhan's presentation that she mentioned that there are multiple opportunities for nature-based enterprises related to maintenance and stewardship. And you are highlighting, right, the importance, and Rosaleen also mentioned how important that part of NBS is, right? It's a living system. So it's not something you plan and then you leave it there and then it's going to work for itself, right? So we need stewards to and skilled people to take care of them. So there are many opportunities there for small and community enterprises, and also activating the neighbors and, you know, activating the neighborhood feeling around these structures. And so I just think that that's a very good segue. We have to close the webinar, unfortunately, but I would like to show the slide with some resources that are coming out of the Interact Bio project. So you see here on screen that the project has just published a guide to biodiversity financing for cities and regions, and also a catalog of financing and technical assistance opportunities in China, Colombia, and South Africa. They're really coming out of the oven, so I really encourage everybody to take a look at these resources. We're going to have the team sharing the links via chat. And with this, I would also ask the next slide and invite you all to join our upcoming webinar. It's going to be on the 31st of January, and it's going to be on tapping into private sector investment for NBS and biodiversity. I think this is also quite an important topic, that we make sure that we don't go into greenwashing with nature-based solutions. We know how serious we're working for biodiversity here. So we need to make sure that this marriage with the private sector happens in a responsible and really genuine way. So we're going to talk about that on the 31st, and we invite everybody to join us. I also want to thank all our amazing speakers today, and thank you, Olga, for co-moderating this with me today. And in the afternoon, we're going to have another session for the other part of the globe. So we're going to also have another one today. Thanks a lot, and wishing you a nice day.